Hey guys, it's Olivie Blake, and this is me not writing. I still have not found a permanent place to film these things, so you're gonna have to just look at my books, I guess. My computer is currently stacked on top of like a truly worrying stack of Masters of Deaths. It's the holiday season, very exciting. I took my son to see the lights at the LA Zoo, which was really cool. There are no animals out, in case you were wondering. It's just the lights, but it is worth it. They're very awesome lights. We did go and see Moana 2, and I think, it was fine. It definitely is proof that like people want movies to take their kids to. There aren't enough like family releases. Certainly, it was the easiest one to be my son's first movie because he's familiar with Moana. I would say that the songs were not as good lyrically. Oops. Like the songs were very, very similar, but lyrically kind of lacking. But you know what? We had a fun time. It was fun. I will say one thing that was very strange about Moana is how much it seemed to fixate on a fear of death, like a normal fear of death. It was kind of like Maui was really worried that Moana was going to get herself killed, and Moana was really worried that she was going to die and miss the rest of her sister's life. I feel like if Disney were able to do this where Moana was a mother and that was her daughter, that storyline might have made more sense. But then of course unless Moana was having a virgin birth, this was not happening in a Disney movie. But yeah, like overall my takeaway from Moana 2 is that it's about death. Okay. Let's see. I've got a few things I wanted to, like a part of this is that I have to talk about my books. I'm not contractually obligated. No one is telling me to do this. In fact, I don't really know that anyone even cares that I do this, but since we're here, Januaries is my most recent release, and I did want to talk a little bit about each of the stories in it because I feel like since it was like my third release of the year, I didn't necessarily give it the time that I would have given / did give other books. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about each story, and someone did ask me to specify which Taylor Swift album goes with each story. Now, when I call Januaries my Eras tour, I do mean my eras, not Taylor Swift's eras, because the collection spans the last almost decade of my life. And so each story is a different era of my storytelling. I do have enough of an ego to say that this is not about Taylor Swift. However, she did allow me to shorthand that, her Eras tour is similar to what I was doing with Januaries. So I will do this, but this is about me. The Wish Bridge. The Wish Bridge, oh, also some art from Poe, who I met, and it was very exciting. Thank you to everyone who came out to meet me in Buenos Aires and also Santiago. It was wonderful. Okay, also someone asked me if there would be a playlist for Januaries, and the answer is no, because Januaries itself is kind of a playlist. I wrote in the dedication, this is my mixtape for you, and so it would be hard for me to then also make a mixtape because I feel like, I don't know. So I'm not intending to do a playlist for Januaries, but it's also because each story would have its own songs, and I don't, So the Wish Bridge, things about this one. I wrote it for Stacey Turner, who is also Calabrina, for the fanfic girlies, for the Dramini girlies. Stacey is a wonderful writer, and she's also an excellent muse because 2 of the stories in this collection were written for her, The Wish Bridge and A Year in January. And when I say I wrote them for her, it's basically that I held her in my mind and thought, what would she want to read? And then I wrote these stories. The Wish Bridge is also Mr. Blake's favorite story. The Audit. My editor, when she first read all the stories that we were going to include in Januaries, she said, I would really like a Nico and Gideon story. And I said, it is too soon for a Nico and Gideon story because the Atlas Complex just came out in January. And I knew this was going to come out in the same year. I did not, and I also didn't want any of I wanted you to be able to read Januaries without connecting it to any of my other work. I wanted it to stand on its own. But I took the idea of the Nico and Gideon dynamic and held that in my head and used it to write The Audit. So technically, The Audit is kind of like Nico and Gideon fanfiction, and Libby is even there if you think about it that way. Also, The Audit is how I realize I truly am obsessed with death, not unlike Moana. Sucker for Pain is a retelling, vaguely a retelling of Great Expectations. I have always found the Estella and Pip dynamic to be very interesting, and I wanted to toy with that in a paranormal way. And then I accidentally turned it into, a polyamorous, vaguely-ish relationship. And I was going to call it Grave Expectations, but I thought Sucker for Pain was a funnier pun. The animation games, this is like classic Olivie. I don't really know what to say about this story. It's a story that I'm not sure I could write now. That it's something that I had to write at the time because it was like, I feel like now there's kind of this expectation that you don't create romantic relationships that are too toxic. And I think, so there was an element of like bravery then that I'm not sure I have now. Like, I'm not sure. We'll see. I'm doing my best with the Gothic, with it's kind of like a monster fucker book. But that's all I know. It's the oldest book in the collection, or the oldest story in the collection, the animation games. The house, you already know these were wedding vows. There's not really much more to say about that. It was my pleasure to write them. I have not yet told my friend who I mentioned in the beginning of the story that I did this to her, so whatever. To Make a Man, that story was written. I needed an additional story for the Lover's Grimm, my third fairy tales collection, and I did not know what I was going to write. I knew I wanted to write a dynamic of an older woman and a younger man, which is like very, very popular this year. I went in with the relationship dynamic of a woman who was a little bit more worldly than the man and who was a little bit also less attached, and why that would be. And it turned into this. I did not know that it was going to be sort of a Greek mythology thing. That was an accident. Pre-existing condition this was the first story that I wrote for this collection, that I knew I wanted to write this one. It actually, I would say this story is maybe more toxic than the animation games, and also quite similar to the animation games in a way that I had to like put them on opposite ends of summer. But I had the idea. I opened, I think there is still a note in my phone that now I have to find. So here's the original note in my phone. Frankenstein necromancer story. I have no memory of whoever I was to her in life, which is a line from the story. I have been seeking a way to die more permanently. You're just depressed, she says briskly, and encourages me to exercise. That is all I had for this story, and it turned into this. Monster Love, that is after my editor asked me to write a story about motherhood. And I was like, literally this was happening at the time. I was like, can you wait a second? My son is throwing up into my hands. And she was like, this is exactly what I mean. You're reaching these sort of peaks in your career, but you also are holding your son's vomit in your bare hands. Like, what is that like? So I wrote Monster Love. How to Dispel Friends and Curse People. That is, I used to do that sort of like absurd poetry that isn't really poetry all the time. I did a lot of it when I was writing fan fiction, specifically when I was writing The Real World Hogwarts, which is a deep cut, but honestly one of my better works. Fates and Consequences, that came from when I had the idea of like, what if, I was in therapy and I was like, what if you died before your fate was fulfilled? What would happen then? And it turned into that. Sous Vide, was the newest story in the collection. I did not feel that the collection as a whole, or that like autumn, the season, was missing something. It wasn't autumnal enough. And since I would say that most of my work fall in autumn generally because they're dark academia and they're psychological thrillers. And so I needed to add something that felt more autumn. So I very quickly wrote Sous Vide and threw it in. And it's actually one of my favorites in the collection. I think that David Monteith's delivery is so funny. I was like rolling on the, like actually rolling. No, I wasn't. I was not. That's hyperbole. But I was ruffling. Sensual Tales for Carnal Pleasures. I don't remember anything about that story. I know it's one of the older ones. I think it is quite atmospheric, and it's the most fairy tale of the stories, so I definitely wanted to include it here, but it's still a big question mark. Chaos Theory is like, this is the one I was probably most excited about. It's I thought a lot about which stories went into winter, and I've talked about how this book is kind of about getting through it and getting through the winters of life. And Chaos Theory, I'm really proud of it. I think it is a really interesting story. I understand some people have said that they would read a series, but I think it doesn't work as a series because once you understand the plot twist, then it's kind of like well, it's over. I guess technically I could write more, but I would envision it more as like an episodic TV series, I think. Something that didn't have an end, as opposed to like a trilogy, because I don't think there's like a big grand ending for that one. And then A Year in January is another, like I said, another one I wrote for Stacy / Calabrina, and it's spiritually friends with Alone with You in the Ether. It's kind of about that reckoning with the love you have for yourself or lack thereof, and also what it can mean to foster a love that comes from a place of illness. So yeah. Oh, I totally forgot to do the eras thing. Balls. The Witch Bridge, Fearless, The Audit, Tortured Poets Department, Sucker for Pain, Reputation, The Animation Games, also Reputation. I feel like there was an era where a lot of the things I was writing fell under the Reputation umbrella. The House, Lover, To Make a Man, Evermore, Pre-Existing Condition, Folklore, Monster Love. I take back, I forget what I said for The Audit, but I take it back and I'm saying 1989 now. Monster Love, actually Monster Love maybe Tortured Poets. How to Dispel Friends and Curse People, debut, Fates and Consequences, Speak Now, Sous Vide, Reputation, or Folklore, Sensual Tales for Carnal Pleasures, Evermore? I don't know. I think I'm just making it up now. Chaos Theory, I'm gonna say 1989. For reasons unknown. A Year in January, I'm going to say Tortured Poets. I made all of that up. There were two questions that I'm considering sort of the same kind of question. The first one is, I'm an aspiring speculative author, and at the moment, book banning has been making me second guess my dreams of pursuing traditional publishing. This is a person who has not started querying yet. So to them, to you, the short answer is you can't worry about something that hasn't happened yet. There is such a long road to publication that I don't think there's the only reason that someone would publish your book is if they really connect to it. Like, first of all, you have to get an agent who really believes in you and the story you're telling. That's one person who super really believes that this book needs to exist. And then they send it around, and then a publisher, or well, an editor decides they really stand behind what you've written. It is not only worth money, it is worth the time of their lives to work on it. And you have to get those people and the sales and marketing and all of those people involved before your book will even exist, much less be banned. So the thing about book banning is, yes, it's terrible, but so many people had to believe in it before it was banned that, like, I think it is more worthwhile to think, how can you write a story that matters? And matters to you, matters enough to you that it will matter to someone else who is completely outside of your brain and imagination. Like, that is where your focus should be. And the thing that these two questions, I haven't even read the second question, have in common is I saw a Blue Sky. I'm not saying you should find me on Blue Sky because I'm not convinced I'm going to use it, but every time I feel the urge to open Twitter now, I open Blue Sky instead just to like train myself. Write generously for people who love your work. Don't write defensively for people who hate your work. And I'm counting this here as like, you cannot write for a bad ending, because like publishing is very hard. I think all of these videos, if you watch them like all together, it's just me telling you over and over how hard and arduous the road to publication is, how difficult it is to have a career in the arts. So I don't think you should be stopping yourself now. I think this is the stage where you write generously and you don't even worry about the people who will hate it or hate you, because you can't do anything about that. I mean, you can oppose book banning generally, but I think in terms of where you fall as an artist, you cannot worry about the people who already hate you. I mean, if you went through your life worrying about all the people who hate you on account of something you can't control, just who you are, then like what could you ever get done, you know? So The other thing was, I'd love to hear your perspective on topics of artistic vulnerability and the safety of self-expression for artists in this day and age. And listen. So this was a part of a much longer question that someone was essentially telling me that they have shared their work before only to be met with hatred on social media and vitriol on social media. Social media is not a real place, okay? First of all, pretty much everyone on social media, like if you think this person is 14 years old, they probably are 14 years old. Like if they're being very loud and angry on the internet, chances are their brain is unformed. And so sometimes you just have to accept that a lot of what is being said to you is not legitimate. Granted, that, like, of course, there are moments, I don't mean to say, like, the effect of it is real. The effect of, like, so much hate in one place can really, really be hard on your brain. And the answer is to just get away from that place. You cannot express your art safely. If you're going to really say something with your art, it's never safe. Putting yourself out there is never safe. Art itself is punk. The making of art is a very punk thing to do. And it's something where you can protect yourself to some degree. You can protect yourself by not going into spaces that are not healthy for you. For example, I don't go on Goodreads. Yeah, there are limits to, people still tag me and stuff, negative reviews, people still say things in my DMs, and yeah, you can't be 100% protected from the hatred that some people will want to show you. But you can also remember that just because they're loud does not mean they're the majority. Just because they're loud doesn't mean they're right. I think it has changed a lot about the way that I interact with social media to just be like, this person is 14 years old. And like, I was saying dumb stuff on the internet when I was 14. And fortunately, those platforms are dead now. I'm pretty sure my Zanga can't be found. And I don't know where my MySpace is. But I also comfortably know, that I would not want anything I said at that era of my life being known publicly. I am not the same person I was then, which is a long way of saying you cannot write generously for people who will love your work. And right now, if you're not sharing it, that has to be you. You have to write generously for yourself. And when you feel the call to share it, you cannot worry about the people who will hate it. You cannot, because people will hate it. People will reject it. At every level of creativity, someone will reject what you have to say. That's what makes the art so punk. If the cost to yourself and your safety and your mental health is so high that sharing your art is not worth it, then it's not worth it. You don't have to. The making of the art itself is the art. It is catharsis enough just to make it. If you feel that you want to share it, then you do have to just understand that there is a cost. I've repeated this many times, but it's something I think about all the time, that whenever I complain about stuff that has to do with my career or that has to do with sharing my writing and the kind of, criticism and vitriol that I get on the internet, which is a lot, my husband says, that's the price you have to pay for the life you want to live. This is what I wanted to do. I wanted to not just write my stories, but to make them available to people. I wanted people to read what I had to say. I always say, there is an ego to this. If you make art for the purpose of sharing it, there is a little bit of ego. It's because you believe you said something worth saying. And good for you. And you should stand behind that. But that doesn't mean that everyone is going to accept it, or that everyone is going to understand it, or that everyone is going to engage with it, or that you can safely create only for the people who will love it. That's not how the world works. That's not how art works. And you have to run these internal calculations on your own, about whether this is worth it to you. You pay the price you have to pay for the life you want to live. And you make a decision about what that is. There is a cost, regardless. I just heard a lyric, who you are is where you put the hours in. So where do you put the hours in? I also have added believe. Because when I was writing Unfailing, my boxing coach used to joke about, you gotta believe. And he would say this as related to boxing, usually. But also when it came to my writing career that was going nowhere, he would joke, you have to believe. Because you have to believe in your own work. No one will ever believe in it if you don't. That's just the truth. And I just remember the first time I inscribed a book to him, and I wrote, believe. Because the whole time I was doing this, even though I thought I might fail, I still believed it would be worth it to succeed. And I think if you remove that belief, then you can't explain anything I did. You know, there is no rational explanation for the path I took to get here except that I believed in it. And so you really can't like allow the possibilities that things could go wrong to offset you, because then you will not go anywhere. You have to be firm on the path that you're on. You gotta believe. Any advice for someone trying/hoping to self-publish? I can't afford an editor, but I'd still like to try. Did you have an editor? I've studied English and writing, but I get so insecure. Okay. I am not a good example for self-publishing. First of all, I don't have a formal English degree. I draft pretty clean, but I still make mistakes, and I should have had an editor. I should have at least had a proofreader. At this point, the bar for self-publishing is higher than it was when I was self-publishing. Let me back up. I never wanted to be self-published, because in order to be self-published, you have to enjoy running your own business. You have to enjoy being your own, if you can't afford to outsource these things, then you need to learn how to do interior design, cover design. I still recommend having a proofreader. It's best, I think, if you pay a proofreader, but if you have friends who will do it as a favor to you, and then it depends how much editing you really want. There's different kinds. If you want a structural editor, if you want like alpha or beta readers, you pay them in something, right? Like I worked with friends, and what I paid them back is that I also read their work, but I didn't pay them in money. And so you'd have to decide here how you want to do this. I mean, if you have very, very generous friends like I have, then maybe that's something you could fall back on. But generally speaking, I think you should at least get someone whose job is proofreading, because I think some of my self-published books, like sometimes I think about the errors that are in them and I am just embarrassed a little bit. But the main thing is that you just have to decide, what are you willing to learn to do on your own? Because if you can't learn to do it well on your own, then you need to pay someone. You must treat your art as if it is worth something, and you also must treat other people's labor as if it is worth something. You should never expect to get things for free. I think that's how we've ended up here at this weird like AI age, when people are like, yeah, art is valuable. Your art is valuable. Treat it like it's valuable, but also that means you have to invest in it. That means you have to put some money in. At least with KDP, which is how I publish, which Amazon, but KDP did make it very easy because it's print on demand. So it used to be that if you were self-publishing, you would have to buy all the books up front and sell them. But now, because of KDP, when someone orders the book is when it's printed. I will add that I also did my best to keep prices very low, which meant that my stories were, like, I tried to keep them relatively short. The Atlas 6, I never wanted to price anything because it was such an amateur endeavor that like I was only writing these books until I got something traditionally published. Like I was only self-publishing to give my stories to my like 300 best fanfic friends while I was trying to be traditionally published, and that was failing. And I had ideas that I tried and they weren't good for the market, and so I would self-publish them instead, and I did not want them to cost more than $9.99. I wanted them to be under 10 American dollars. And that the longer the book is, the more the printing costs. And so if the book is quite long and the printing costs are very high, Amazon takes their cut, and then yours is that little bit left over. So for each copy that was sold of the Atlas 6, I made about 75 cents. Or potentially less than that. I tried to price things so that I made $1 off each copy, but once they got too big, that was impossible. This is why I'm not a good example. I was never trying to make a living off of self-publishing. It was just something I did while I was trying to be traditionally published. The fact that my books took off, or that the Atlas 6 took off, was a weird cultural lightning strike that had to do with the pandemic and the rise of TikTok and dark academia and all this stuff that I had no control over. But I knew immediately that I didn't want to continue self-publishing because I did not want to do sub-rights. So other languages, other publishers, I didn't want to worry about that. I didn't want to worry about audio production. I didn't want to create a hardcover. There was all these things that people were asking me about. Also, like subscription boxes were starting to come to me individually. These were things I did not want to handle on my own. I wanted to have a production department and a marketing department. I hate promotion. I don't want to do anything but write my little books. And if that's the way you feel, it's definitely better, I think, to aim for traditionally publishing, because otherwise you have to enjoy the business part in order to enjoy self-publishing. The other thing is that you probably won't make your money off of one book. You make your money self-publishing off of a pipeline. You must release books quite quickly because self-publishing readers are very voracious. That's why typically if you're going to self-publish, you want to do it in for an adult age group, in erotica, fantasy, romance, in genres where people are accustomed to consuming at high volume, so that they will finish something and immediately pick up something else, which is not true of, say, historical, for example. You can't self-publish literary. You can't self-publish for young adults because you can't really reach your audience. Maybe you can now, pending who your ideal audience is, but it's not advisable really, because, you know, a publisher can help you get your books in school libraries and stuff like that to actually reach your audience. Anyway, lots of business stuff. I was like, I can answer this quickly. If you want to make money off of it, which maybe you don't, maybe you just want to do what I was doing, then you do have to continuously produce work, because you make the money when people continue to come back to you. You don't really make it off just one book selling at high volume. Things to think about. Someone asked, in general, what is your daily writing routine as a full-time author? I don't write nearly as much as I wish I did. I know that I was just complaining about when you're self-published, you have to run things like a business. But traditionally publishing, you have to do a bunch of administrative nonsense also. I'm currently signing tip-in sheets. It's a disaster. I hate it very much. And a lot of times I have to take care of things like write a letter for ARC readers, or write a letter for the Goodreads mailer, or this blog person wants an interview, or this podcast recording, and that cuts into my writing time, because in order to write, I really need to have a lot of time, uninterrupted time to focus, and sometimes that's hard to come by. So every day is very different, but that's a kind of a good thing to me. I never wanted to work a job where every day looked the same. Like, it was very important to me that every day feel a little bit different, and what I'm doing every day is different. But at the same time, I think there are adjustments I could make. Before my son was born, I used to write for like seriously, not joking, like 12 hours a day. And I would publish immediately because I was self-publishing or doing fan fiction or whatever, and it would just it would get out of my brain, off my desk, onto the internet. And so I was able to just get my practice, I say churning out, obviously it was more artistically minded than that, but producing at high volumes, so that now if I only have 3 hours while my son is at school, I can sit down, boom, start writing, and produce my 5,000 words for the day or whatever. That's not something I could have done at the beginning of my writing career, I worked my way up to that. It was like training for a marathon. My endurance, my writing, my creativity endurance is very good. But actually, in the last couple of years, my creativity endurance has taken a backslide because I get interrupted by these little administrative tasks, which is why one of my New Year's resolutions for next year is to write a little bit every day, because I think that once I get into it, like once I'm in the drafting phase, it's very easy for me to write what I need to write, for the most part. Some things are hard. The Gothic that I just wrote, The Kiss Your Devils in Los Angeles, was very hard, but that was for other reasons. That was for mental box reasons. But I think sometimes when I write something, when I get in the groove, then it's easy to write. And then when I get interrupted because I spend a few weeks doing tasks, then it's hard to get back into the process of writing every day. So right now I want to jump into my new manuscript, but since it's been a while since I've been writing every day, I feel out of practice, and it's kind of a slow start. So I think turning the machine on and off is very inefficient. I mean, it is very inefficient. So I want to get better at keeping things running, even if the thing I'm writing is not necessarily urgent or doesn't need to be done. It's just something that I'm doing to make sure that everything is flowing, because I write, because if I didn't, I'd be insane. And I mean that clinically, that if I were not, every time that I go a long time without writing, it is bad for my brain. So yeah. But the real answer is every day looks a little bit different, and sometimes it's tasks, and sometimes it's writing. But I also like to keep a variety of different projects around. So something that I'm drafting, something that I'm revising, and then tasks. my life right now is a little bit unusual because my son is so young, and I make a point to spend a lot of time with him. He's young, and I want to be there. So sometimes I choose things that are not writing because I know that this time in my son's life is fleeting, and I'll never get this time back. But I think things will change again, and probably in a more long-term way when he's like actually in school every day. But I've got some time before then. I'm gonna hopefully do this quickly. So as an American millennial, was there a specific social or political event that shifted your view on humanity? I mean, famously, my generation, we lived through not just 9/11, but like the mortgage crisis and the Wall Street bailout and the 1% and Sandy Hook and however many school shootings, like truly however many. But I think I would place more emphasis on, I am an outlier because I studied the social sciences. My background is in the social sciences. So I have a degree in public policy and urban planning. When I was a freshman in college, so about 18 years old, we studied Chavez Ravine, which is an area of LA that essentially someone wanted to come in and build better affordable housing. And in order to do that, he convinced each of the residents who had lived there for a long time, there was a whole community there, to move out temporarily and then move into this new and better housing. And this was a really long process. But the project lost popularity because it was during the McCarthyist, like very anti-communism era. And so this felt a little bit like communism to people who had money invested in not having communism. And so what ended up happening is that land sat vacant for a while. Long story short, it's now Dodger Stadium. And all those people that were displaced were just displaced. And I think that was the first point when I realized, like, the government doesn't care about you. Or like, I guess, no. What I realized is that some people really care. But there are a lot of obstacles to compassion. The main obstacle to compassion is money and profit. And I have, as I've mentioned, and as I wrote into the Atlas 6, a very, very bleak outlook on institutions and how well, or if at all, they serve the individual or the collective. This is why I write the things that I write. I'm not doing it for the aesthetic of dark academia. I'm doing it because I don't think institutions can be trusted. I think, as I've said many times, the system that we're in prioritizes profit over people. And this is not new, and it is not new to me. And each time I see how dark that can really get, it's frustrating. I am someone who dropped out of law school. I thought that if I could participate in the system in a better way, with more power, I thought that if I went to law school, I would have more power to change the system for the better. And then I realized lawyers can't actually change anything. Certainly public defenders can't. You can view your life as like a case by case situation. Like my best friend is a social worker, and he is very good about focusing on the micro. He does what he can do for the people that he can help. And I'm glad he does that because someone needs to do that work. But that was not satisfying enough to me. In 3 years, I had one not guilty verdict, and I had many not guilty clients. And I got to really see, like, the prison system is really bad. Our systems are really bad. There was not one big awakening to me. Although I will say that motherhood really radicalized me, because I don't just want my child to be safe and to have resources and whatever. I want all children. I want all children to have the things that all children deserve. And it's very, very frustrating to me when people behave in ways that don't align with that belief. Once you understand how many people in the world are cowards and traitors, it's really hard to look away from. A lot of this is in Girl Dinner. I feel like nothing I say, I feel like everything I say will be or certainly can be criticized, because this is not really, I've been talking for a long time, but this is not technically long form. This is me on the spot saying things. But I think you have to remember that there's a difference between what is real and what is not. Clicktivism, for example, is not real. clout chasing is not real. I think there are lots of ways that you can be overwhelmed by the misery in the world, and some people are better at dealing with that than others. And the way that I deal with it is to make art, because I wish I were more useful. I wish I were more productive in that way. I wish that I had been able to finish my law degree and that my brain wouldn't break. You know, like I wish that I could have used my law degree to get into politics or something. Like anyone could do it. Why not me? Now the answer is my husband would never be on board with a political campaign. But it's more like, if I'm so angry at the system, then I have to find ways to change it. But unfortunately, I specifically am not good at working within the system, and the only thing that I can really do is make art about it and hope that I reach someone who is capable of doing something, who is open to having their mind broadened to thinking about things in a different way. And there's no guarantee of that, of course, because as an artist, half my job is to entertain. Really, my job is to entertain and to hopefully also transmit a message, to have the entertainment be the vessel for change, which is so distant, and I don't ever know if that's happening. But I have to believe. So yeah. All right. Well, things are not great. I won't lie to you. I don't feel great about our sociopolitical context, but that just means we have to do something. We have to become dangerous, okay? This is the thing. In order to protect those who are vulnerable, the rest of us must become dangerous. This has been me, Olivie Blake, not writing. I actually did find my dagger, but it's not here. And I will see you next time.